Hi everyone, this is Will from Productions², and we are back to continue our Sword of the Stars Let's Play walkthrough. So what is this? To downgrade to a non-aggression agreement. Fine, whatever.
As you wish, Valkona. We will not attack.
So, what we're gonna do now in the beginning here. I'm gonna try and do it, and try and do the multitasking for this, but we're talking about Persona 5 a bit. I mentioned in the stream that I tried to do earlier in the week that I was going to do a kind of a first impressions video or commentary during one of our recorded videos, and this is going to be it. So for those of you that don't know, Persona 5 has basically been, streaming for Persona 5 has basically been crap canned, dren canned, shit canned, whatever you want to say. By Sega. You know, I don't even believe it's Atlas. I think it's Sega, to be honest with you. I think and want to believe that it's Sega that's pulling the strings on this, because I can't believe Atlas would actually do that and make those threats, because the Atlas is a very gaming community. I'm gonna say friendly is not really the right term. They are basically one of the most gaming community oriented or aware companies, gaming developers out there. Just because, you know, the Shin Megami Tensei series, Persona in particular, have these large gamer communities and are very they're very aware of, you know, of not kind of stepping on toes and things like that. Whatever, you get the idea. But Sega, on the other hand, is a AAA gaming publisher that's basically had a lot of failure over the last 6 to 8 years, and they've gotten pretty bitter about it. And if you look at any of the recent games they published, you look at some of the streaming guidelines that they put out for those things, it just sounds so much like this post that Atlas made about the streaming things. And even in that post, they say our masters in Japan. It's like hinting that it's, you know, Sega that's like sticking their boots up Atlas's arses, making them do stuff. But this BS going on with it is just ridiculous. But anyway, so those who don't know, Atlas basically said you can stream the game as long as you don't, you know, do the stuff that we're going to tell you about, actually spoil for you in the game if you don't stream this stuff in our videos that we actually told you happened. And if you don't post videos over 90 minutes, if you don't post, you know, 80% of the game, which is the cutscenes and cinematics and animations, and if you don't show any of the boss battles from the second two areas, and you can show the first boss battle for some reason because it doesn't break whatever ridiculous stuff Sega wants them to do. I don't know. Basically, and then on top of all that, though, they say you can stream and you can do all this stuff based on these conditions, but then they completely disable streaming in the PS4 entirely for any reason whatsoever. The entire game is basically blocked from streaming, even taking screenshots. Whenever you complete an achievement, the PS4 wants to take a screenshot to, like, say what you're doing, where you were when you took the screenshot. And it comes up with a thing that says you cannot take a screenshot at this time, or something similar to that. So it's just ridiculous what Sega's forced them to do. And so it's like, you know, the only people that are able to do any streaming on Persona 5 are those that have capture cards, or they're recording it with a HD camera or something. And so that's not me, because I don't have, well, I have an HD camera, but I don't have a capture card. So I was only able to do a little bit of it, and then got blocked out, and I didn't realize it actually entirely blocked. Even, I guess the commentary, the microphone audio was still there, but everything else is blocked off. And so wasn't able to do a live walkthrough for it, and a lot of people aren't able to. So what I want to do is I want to do kind of first impressions of it, and I'm going to Like I say right now, if you don't want P5 spoilers, don't listen to this video because I'm going to do them. Even though Atlas/Sega said not to, there's nothing they can't do shit about it really. GameStop put out a review of the game, and they basically spoiled the entire end of the game, and they didn't say jack about it. So they can't do jack about people putting spoilers in commentary reviews or in reviews online or anything like that. It's just them being having to bend over backwards over a barrel while standing on 4 sets of hands to I don't know the word. I'm trying to think of the word, but I can't think of it right now. It happens more often than I'd like it to. To basically felicitate Sega. I guess we'll put it that way. It's the best way to put it, I guess. And so it's just a bunch of BS. But so Persona 5 had pretty. I don't know if I intentionally did not watch most of the Persona 5 released stuff. Mainly because I didn't want to have spoilers and things. I wanted to be interested about some stuff, not have learned about previously. I did watch the character trailers, and I think it was what ended up being the opening intro, game intro trailer. But that's all I really watched. I didn't go looking for any kind of in-depth review from the Japanese release. That's the other thing about this. The game's been out in Japan for half a year, basically, and Atlas is still worried about spoilers getting out. It's like, what the hell? They don't think people can read Japanese. They don't think people in Japan translate things to English and put it out. I mean, the stuff that Sega's making them do is just ridiculously stupid. And really, Sega deserves to die at this point, in my opinion. After they basically gave up with the Dreamcast, Sega's been this. I don't get me wrong, Sega's published some good games like Valkyria Chronicles. At the same time, they've also destroyed those good games by not putting them out on the proper consoles. For example, like Valkyria Chronicles, everything after the first one was put on the PS Vita, or actually PSP, which was basically, well, I guess PSP wasn't dead on arrival, but at the same time, the PSP was DOA in the United States. Didn't really catch on that well. Even worse than the Vita, to be honest. At the same time, though, they could have easily ported it to the PS3. There's no excuse for why they didn't, other than that they interpreted from whatever ridiculous sales numbers or whatever expectations they had for sales for the original game on the PS4, and whatever stupid
cartographer, chart the path.
Brand analysis they did, or whatever, target audience analysis they did. Somehow they determined that
As you wish, Marcona.
They were going to put it on the PSP because that was going to make them the most money, which was stupid because they should have done it on both, but whatever. And it's just been downhill for them for a very long time. I don't see that reversing anytime soon. But anyway, back to Persona 5. So I didn't watch any of that stuff, and didn't really follow the developments at all, and didn't really pay any much attention to it until those other videos came out. And then after that, I kind of stayed away from it. So let's try and get the most pure experience from it. That said, spoilers and things like that, they have no effect on me. You could tell me, you know, every single thing about Persona 5 from beginning to end, and I'd still play it and still would think what I think about it. For example, I can watch stuff times over ad nauseum and still not be tired of it. Some people, like, they read a book or watch something once and it's like, you know, they can't watch it again because it's just boring. For me, it's the other way around. You know, the more times I watch something or read something, the more details I pick out that I didn't notice before. Perfect example of something that I can just watch over and over again, or example of the fact that I can, is Spaceballs. I've watched that probably 47 times since I've owned it, and I could sit down and watch it again over and over, day after day, and probably still won't get tired of it, just because it's not so much the experience of it, it's the content of it, you know. I don't really care about the story as far as how it ends. What I care about is what happens in the movie and the comedy and things of it like that. I'm not one of these people that kind of gets hung up on once you know the ending, there's no reason to watch it, you know, because they see the objective reason of watching something is to see how it ends, not what happens between the beginning and the end of it. Whereas that's where I'm pretty much at, is where, you know, I don't watch it for how it ends or how it starts. I watch something or read something for the stuff in between. That's the actual, you know, heart of whatever it is that I'm watching or reading. Let's throw some repair ships, some armors. Okay.
Shipyards at your disposal, Bakona.
So, even if I read all the spoilers and things like that, it wouldn't have really made an impact. It might have made somewhat of an impact, as there would have been less, like, holy effing crap moments or something. But at the same time, it still would have been, you know, very good drama to me or whatever. So, I got it, pre-ordered the Take Your Heart edition, and have been playing it. That's actually still being processed. Still going through that. So, this one, which we're not doing anything on. Okay, I already have those. We need to do the MD, so. Alright.
Yes, Bakona. We'll have the ships out in no time.
And so it kind of starts out a tiny bit slow, just a tiny bit slow. It starts out actually pretty interesting in the fact that and again, like I said before, if you don't want spoilers, haven't played the game yet, or planning to buy it and play it, or just don't like spoilers at all, stop listening right now. I'll give you 20 seconds to stop the video or something before I continue. It's actually probably quite a bit of time, 20 seconds. So you probably have it stopped by now. And if not, then I'll take that as your consent to spoil Persona 5 now. But I'm going to do some massive savage spoilers here. So, oh wow, what the hell just happened? Holy crap. Okay, we had way too many Strike Force CNCs, that's why.
You heard him. We must increase the fleet.
The game starts out and you're this character that apparently, as I say, no good deed goes unpunished. He stops this guy from raping this woman, basically, and this guy turns out to be some kind of high-powered political sycophant, and is all upset at the fact that this woman was you know, fighting back against him when I guess she should be just on her knees or something. And so he takes it out on the main character by suing him for assault. And nobody, not even the woman, says jack about it. And the main character ends up getting basically losing the case and gets expelled from school and is forced to move to a new city to go to school because there aren't any other schools in the place he came from, I guess. So basically, it's forced to move to Tokyo. I forget where he comes from. to even mention it. And so he goes to this, is forced to go to this other school, has to leave his parents' home, and ends up staying at this dingy place above a coffee shop because one of his parents knows the guy that runs it, and the guy owed them a favor, so you end up in his place, a place called LeBlanc. It's a cafe shop. And let's see. You don't shoot us, we don't shoot you. Oh, really? We'll see about that. But so the game starts basically with all these people telling you not to screw around and do stuff, because if you set like one tiny hair follicle out of line, they're gonna expel you and throw you into the juvenile detention. I am cutting out some pieces from the very beginning. This isn't actually the beginning of the game. It's where the game starts time-wise, but the game actually starts in the past. Sorry, in the future. And you are flashing back to what happened during the game, throughout the game, based on the scenes that you see when the game actually starts. So I'm leaving that part out because that'll be a little more less spoilery if I leave that out. I'd say I just told you about it, but at the same time you don't really know the circumstances, so, or why you're relieving. You're relieving yourself from the past. No, you're reliving that past stuff. So you also have to find out when you get the game. So these guys are not part of that non-aggression pact. So yeah, we can fight them. Our 18 cruisers and 1 destroyer to their 18 cruisers and no destroyers. And of course, ours are pretty much beat to hell and theirs aren't. Manual, or do I try to parlay with them for a turn? Let's try and not blow each other to hell. No, that didn't work. We blew each other to hell. Alliance dissolved. Yeah, all of our ships were destroyed. We didn't get any of theirs? Really? That's total bullcrap, really. Then again, I don't know, maybe they have stronger... They have freaking plasma projectors? Seriously? Son of a... Anyway, so, and so you go to the school, and the faculty makes this big whole thing about the fact that you're basically a criminal, and you're coming to their school, and again they tell you if you screw around we'll expel you and throw you to the wolves, so to speak. And it gets out to the general student population that you're an ex-con, or not an ex-con, but you are a criminal. And a whole bunch of stuff dialogue-wise in terms of like stuff you hear around the place is impacted by that. But as you're playing through, you run into this character, this teacher, who's basically the main sports person, sports teacher, sports leader, or whatever in the school, named Kamoshida. And it's pretty much, you can pretty much tell right off the bat that there's just something off about him, and the way that things go down in the very first time that you see him, which is you're going to school and it's raining, and one of the girls from your class happens to stop by the same place you are, where you're taking shelter from the rain, and Kamoshida drives up and asks if she wants a ride. A little too friendly, in a little bit too friendly of a way, and she gets in and they go. And from that point on, you kind of get certain ideas about what his character is. But then as time progresses, you get into altercations with him throughout the beginning of the game. And it kind of starts going slow. And then you hit a point where you end up in the first palace. When palace is basically similar to a Tartarus kind of structure. Except it's created by individual people who have very, 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 very
System
fracked up
update.
personality. So, oh my god.
A few ships approaching Varkona.
One ship? Well, this is only one ship. That means they maybe have a system over here. I only have refineries here too. But it's only one ship, so I'm not too worried about it. The more dangerous thing is this here. They got tons of crap over there we gotta deal with. Is this actually... This is fully done. So this is one of our main... Yeah, this is one of our main things here. So we're actually building ships at the moment. Okay. Damn. And so you meet up with the... during that part of the scene where you first see Kamoshida... you run into this other guy who's not in part of your class, but he's in the same year. He's not in your homeroom. Ryuji. And, you know, talking with him, and then all of a sudden you get dragged into this palace. And the palace is basically a manifestation of the way in which the owner of that palace sees the reality around them. So, for example, in Kamoshida's case, it's how he perceives the school and the students at the school and the faculty at the school. Well, normally, I guess it's just the students. There weren't any faculty figures in the palace. So the way he thinks of the student body of the school and the school in terms of how they relate to him. And that's what a palace basically is. It's basically kind of a Tartarus manifestation based on the perceptions of the person that owns it, or that created it. And through going through and clearing it and beating it, you're able to change maybe not the nature of the person, but you can change how they perceive themselves and the actions they've undertaken. It's basically how the structure of the game works in terms of those places. So, you meet up with this Ryuji character, and you end up getting into the Kamoshida's palace, where you run into this cat-like character named Morgana. And it's not clear whether it's like I think it's gonna be kind of like a Teddy-like character in some ways. It's not clear if it's a guy or a male or female character, though. Morgana seems to want to refer to himself as a he, mainly because the fact that he lusts after on most of the game, or at least most of the game so far. So you meet up with this cat character and kind of explains to you the stuff that I just explained about what the frack the palace is and where they're at and what the metaverse is. And it explains that they have to kind of penetrate into this castle far enough to find the treasure it's held within it and steal it. And so the treasure is basically some object that is a focal point for the creator of that palace's perspective on the world around them. So, for example, let's say that I'm going to skip ahead and spoil the end of the palace for Kamoshida, but in Kamoshida's case, his actual treasure his treasure in the metaverse is a crown, which represents him being the king of the school and being able to lord over the students of the school. But when you jump out of the metaverse, it turns into an Olympic gold medal, and he actually did win a gold medal in the Olympics, and that's how he ended up at the school and getting so much power over everyone at the school. Because he's a big shot Olympic person that that's been keeping their volleyball team afloat, and it's just kind of really kind of convoluted but somewhat sense-making kind of storyline as for why the school gives him so much leeway. And so after he won that medal, he never was able to kind of recapture that moment, so he started slipping into this kind of passive-aggressive state. Begrudgingly took this position at the school as the volleyball coach and coach of other teams. And slowly over time, his grudge over not being able to kind of recapture his old glory, Olympic past, kind of changed him and made him more of a dangerous person and more violent to the stuff around him, basically. Which leads him to, and again, this is a huge spoiler, so close your ears, kiddies, if you can't handle spoilers. Leads him to basically physically assault the male students of the various sports teams, and also then sexually assault the female students of those teams as well, as blackmailing An and Suzu, I think is her name, into almost becoming basically, his concubines, if you will, to sleeping with him, or basically ruin their futures or whatever, and that leads. I don't think it's Suzu. It's something else. Siriu? No, it's from the next one. It's something different. There's another girl though, besides An, that basically tries to commit suicide because An didn't sleep with Kamoshida, which was a requirement for him to let her be the main player on the volleyball team, like the lead player on the volleyball team, and also threatened to make sure that she never got into colleges or things like that. Basically uses influence to ruin her life, and so that causes her to try to commit suicide. And so you go through this really fracked up dungeon where you've got the male students being tortured in various ways, and then you have all the female students, basically, in his perception of them, being a harem of sex slaves, basically. And once you get through it, you find the crown stashed away in the treasure room. You steal it, and An basically beats the ever-living crap out of him in the metaverse, which in turn makes him basically commit, self-report himself of all the stuff he did, and also pledge to kill himself for penance for it, which he doesn't, because people stop him from doing that. But it causes a whole uproar, and things go kind of crazy for a while. And that's kind of how the game progresses for all of them, in terms of how the main story things progress in terms of the dungeons and whatnot. It's that same kind of pattern where you have a particularly powerful individual abusing their influence, and the goal of the Phantom Thieves is to penetrate into their palaces far enough to find the objects that they treasure the most, steal that object, and force them to kind of come to terms with what they've done in the real world and turn themselves in, or basically destroy themselves, socially speaking, in the real world, as a way of making up for the injustices they've done to the people around them. And I have to say that I was just thinking about this last night, and it's kind of a weird thing when you think about it. Persona 3, I thought, had the darker story between that and 4. But this story is darker in a different way, and it's darker than Persona 3's in a different way. In Persona 3, the story was dark because of the subliminal messaging and the atmosphere about it. You had the C's team evoking their personas by shooting themselves in the head with a fake gun, but still, to the brain, it's like they're committing suicide, which allows them to shatter their preconceived barriers and their perceptions of themselves to allow their personas to come forth. In this game, it's more actual darkness in the story itself that makes it dark, not the atmosphere. And don't get me wrong, there's some pretty dark stuff in Persona 3's story, but mainly the story in 3 is pretty standard fare. 4's story was a lot less dark in terms of atmosphere, but the story was still similarly dark to Persona 3's. Maybe a little bit more dark because it involved actual murderings of people happening, and